Welcome to IndyStar.com. It's Stephen Holder here with Zach Keefer, and we're back. We've been gone a while. We haven't done one of these podcasts for quite some time. I guess maybe when did we do our last one? Like when the season ended, maybe? No, I think we did it after the change of general managers. You might have heard about that.
Yeah, Chris Ballard taking over, I guess. It's been a while, though. We have not chopped wood in a while.
We haven't chopped
wood. Much to popular demand, we're back.
So everything's better in your world today, obviously, with that being said. So we're back, and it's a couple days before the NFL draft here as we're taping this, and there's all sorts of possibilities. This thing could get really interesting before the week is out. Obviously, the first round Thursday night, and then we'll go from there. But before we even get to the draft, we've been at Colts headquarters a couple times here in the last couple of weeks and talking to some of the new players. The veteran players are back for off-season workouts, which are well underway. And I think we've learned a few things. One, I would say, just an overarching theme here is, wow, this team looks totally different. I mean, like, you got to relay the Kamar Aiken story, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're around this team every day for 6 months, and you feel like you know everyone in the locker room for the most part. I mean, the 53, maybe not so much the practice squad guys, but you know the faces and all that. And then this guy walks into the media room, and you look up and you say, who the heck is that?
And we're supposed to interview this dude, right?
And it's Kamar Aiken, and it's the new wide receiver who's supposed to push Dante Moncrief and Philip Dorsett for that third spot. But that sort of symbolizes the turnover that we've seen. 40% of the roster could be new players. Will be new players by the time they hit training camp in late July and August. That means undrafted rookies, we're going to find out who those guys are in the next few weeks. We got the 7 draft picks as of right now that we'll find out over the next week or so. And they signed, 13 new guys. They re-signed 5 new guys. It's a totally different team, especially on one side of the ball.
Yeah, I've said this before. I'll say it again. The NFL, it's all about turnover, right? These teams change completely, year after year. So that's not breaking news, but usually you don't see it to this degree, and especially on defense, it's not just 3 or 4 guys. They could have 6, 7 new starters on defense.
I expect them to, and I tweeted this last week. I would have loved to have been in the room when Chris Ballard finished watching the tape and said, "I'm going to blow this unit up," because that's what he's done. There's no other way to put it. And we were talking before we started recording. Who are the starters right now that you're very confident will be there in Week 1 in Los Angeles on defense? I've got Vontae Davis, probably Jonathan Hankins, Clayton Gathers, and I'm not 100% sure on many others.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of guys like Darius Butler. Is he the starting safety? I mean, I don't know. I think maybe, possibly.
I mean, John Simon will find, Jabal Sheard.
Jabal Sheard will be on the field. Right.
But there's a lot of open competition.
That's still 5 guys.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And this is now after free agency is pretty much done. So it's not as if the season ended 2 weeks ago, okay? So you talk about turnover. It's not just the turnover, it's also the uncertainty moving forward. They're still not there yet. They still have so much to be decided, even though things have settled down and we kind of know who the returning players are in terms of veterans, draft picks still to come.
Right.
But even still, there's still so much uncertainty to be worked out. And you know what? The one good thing that comes out of that is there will be competition in training camp.
Training camp's going to be fun this year.
It will be different. It will be interesting. And you and I have talked about this on and off the air. We're not really on the air, are we? But we've talked about this publicly and privately. There's been, I think, too many assumed starters on this team, and that's going to change.
Too many starters by default.
Yes.
And we mentioned the most glaring examples last year where, we go to New York for that Monday night game, and I remember, the starting inside linebackers are Antonio Morrison and Edwin Jackson, and that's not a knock on them. It's a knock on the depth of talent. There was too many guys at cornerback last year who were just starting because they played cornerback, not because they had earned the job in camp. And over the course of the defense, that was the story of last season. There were just too many guys that were there just because they were there.
Yeah. Some of it from attrition, injuries. It is what it is. And they did have a lot of that.
And that hurt them last year.
They had a ton of injuries, and I think, we probably don't reference that enough. But even so, they got most of those guys back, and and it was what it was. I mean, the ability just wasn't there. And you talked about Chris Ballard blowing this thing up. I think he also realized, I mean, this is just me talking, but I think he probably also realized that, man, this is so far overdue.
Yeah.
Like it should have been done before the defense got to an average age of like 31.
Yeah.
Like you can't wait that long. But they did, and that was their mistake. So
and to that point, it's going to take some time.
Sure.
You don't build a defense in 1 year. They might have some good moments this year. They might have some good stretches.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take some time, though. So
Sure.
we will say this now. We will say this throughout the season. I think Chris Ballard's plan is going to take effect over several years as opposed to just a quick fix. This is not going to be a quick fix.
And I think he actually has been somewhat honest about that. And certainly I've had that conversation with him. And I think he's also referenced it publicly to some extent. Maybe not directly, but I think if you listen to Chris Ballard, you've come away knowing that he is not promising you a Lombardi trophy this year, okay?
Yeah.
Like that's not going to happen, and he never came into this job with that sort of attitude or perspective, and I think Jim Irsay has bought into this as well.
I was going to say his boss has absolutely seconded that.
Yeah. I mean, it was Jim Irsay when he hired Chris Ballard who said following the press conference, I would rather take a couple steps back and win in the long term than just barely get to the playoffs and not go anywhere. So they're thinking long term, and I think everything they've done this offseason, the draft included, will be with that in mind, with a long-term philosophy. So, let's just talk about maybe a couple of quick things in terms of the existing roster before we get to the draft. Today we heard from a couple guys. I thought T.Y. Hilton, I thought he was really focused, and I thought he was really honest about a couple of things. He basically said, look, 8-8, not acceptable, and that can never happen again. And then I thought when he was asked about the competition behind him, I thought he kind of issued a challenge to Donte Moncrief. Did you read it that way?
I did, and I like that. And I thought about T.Y. Hilton a little bit earlier today, and I thought he really did grow in terms of a leadership role last season. I remember, he would come out and he would make the big statements. I'm gonna step up and we're gonna win this game on Sunday. And then he did it. He delivered. Yes. He was a more complete receiver in 2016. He led the league. We all know that, in receiving yards. But he was a dynamic game changer on a more consistent level. There was less of that disappearing act, which has plagued him throughout his early career.
Yeah.
And he's absolutely a leader in this locker room, whether he likes it or not. He has to be. Him, Anthony Costanzo on the offensive line, and then obviously number 12. Because on defense, who knows? They've lost the pillars in Robert Mathis. But yeah, I kind of like that from T.Y. Hilton, and he needs to keep doing that because this is a young receiving room behind him, and they've got some guys that are going to be pushing them.
Yeah, and to be specific, what he said, what I'm referencing is, he was asked about Donte Moncrief and just some of the younger guys, and what he said about Donte was, look, you know what? Hey man, it's time. He says this is a contract year. If you want that money, step up and go get it. And what he didn't say was that. And look, we know that those two have a good relationship, and that T.Y. Hilton is Donte Moncrief's biggest fan. So this, right. I don't want to send the wrong message here. But what he didn't say was that Donte Moncrief is a great player and he's arrived. No, he didn't send that message. He instead said, look, he's got work to do and it's time. Let's do it. Let's make it happen.
And where does Donte Moncrief need to get better?
Oh, I think he just needs to basically just show up more and just really I think be more consistent, frankly.
Right.
He's been a guy.
Had a tough injury year last year.
Oh, sure.
And he was a killer in the red zone. But around that, moving the ball down the field, wasn't nearly as effective.
I agree with that. I think, yes, Andrew Luck looks for Donte Moncrief in the red zone because that's where he is just, supremely effective,
Absolutely.
Clearly, right? He's a big target, et cetera, right? We know all that. But I don't want to see him just concede to T.Y. Hilton when it's like 3rd and 6 from the 47. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Go demand the ball, go get the ball, tell the quarterback, get in his face, whatever. Like, you got to be a guy. And this is not a knock on him whatsoever. I think what I'm trying to say is that he can be that kind of player, and he can be one who has earned the right. I think who can earn the right to be that kind of guy, but he's got to get there, and this is the time to do it. A big year for him, I think.
That's really
in 2017.
The T.Y. they're very close friends.
Sure.
That he didn't say he deserves it. He said he needs to go get it.
Yeah.
Different way of thinking.
It is. And look, I think T.Y. kind of established himself at a different rate than Dante Moncrief has so far in his career. When T.Y. was younger, I would say,
Clutch plays.
Yes. Big plays, splash plays, certainly from day one, really. I mean, even as a rookie. And Dante, I think, has butted up against that level but hasn't broken through that ceiling. And health was a factor last year, but I still think there's another step there that he has yet to take, and I think that's what T.Y. Hilton's talking about.
He was not here last week. As of last week, Dante Moncrief was not here. That was probably the more notable absence on this team, but he has posted several videos that he wants everyone to know that he is working his tail off. I believe him. I do know he loved the game. But this is it's a big year for him, and Jack Mewhort as well. The other guy that will be entering a contract year. I think there is much to prove if you're Dante Moncrief.
I would agree with that. And the other guy I think is worth mentioning is we had a talk today with Jabal Sheard. Look, he's a Patriot through and through in terms of his approach to the media. Like, he's not going to say a whole lot. But the one thing that I did walk away with was he was very clear that he had a lot of conversations both with Chuck Pagano and Ted Monachino, the defense coordinator, about him playing various roles.
Yeah, very versatile, it sounded.
Yeah, he has been in his career. I mean, in Cleveland and in New England, he's been a guy who did a little bit of everything. And as he mentioned, he's played some of the interior defensive line, granted in a 4-3 setting probably, but played some interior defensive line. He's played defensive end in a three-point stance. He's played outside linebacker. And he's going to be able to do it all. I mean, he's a big dude. He can take on offensive linemen, but he can also, beat you with speed and moves on the outside. So he is kind of a Swiss Army knife for these coaches, and it sounds like they've had a lot of conversations to that extent. And I think that's something the Patriots have just really excelled at. And I'd like to see the Colts tap into guys' skill sets in a more efficient way. So hopefully they can do that with him.
There's no defense better at adapting week to week than the Patriots. Everybody knows this. It's a 3-4 one week. It's a 4-3. They just adapt to the scheme they're facing. Mm-hmm. And Sheard, he talked about the versatility and kind of being all over the field, and he was standing up, then he was down, hands in the dirt. Bottom line is Colts need playmakers. They need guys who can make a difference, who can make those splash plays, because they didn't have any of them last year. So he seems like a weapon Teddy Monachino is very excited about using. Here, I'm calling him Teddy like all the players did.
That's what they called him. Now, the other guy, I think we'll probably move on to this, but one guy I think it's worth mentioning as well is Ryan Kelly. He came in today, and we had a few moments with him, and what I got a little bit of swagger from him. He always had swagger, and not swagger like braggadocious swagger.
He just doesn't mess around. There's just no BS with him. From the day he got here, he stood up. He had just been drafted in the first round, and he had his jersey with him, and he didn't even smile for the photos.
It's like, can we get this over with? I got things to do.
That's Ryan Kelly in a nutshell right there. He didn't change from day one to the end of his rookie year.
Right. I mean, you talk about they always say, and we always laugh about this when Pagano says this about players. They always say about guys, well, it's not too big for him.
Chuck Pagano has said that about 500 players.
It's true of only a handful.
It's true of Andrew Luck and Ryan Kelly.
It's true of Ryan Kelly for sure. This guy's like, all right, whatever. What do you guys want? I got work to do.
I mean, he played for Nick Saban. He played. He was a Sabanized man.
Yes.
He came into the pros as ready as you can be. He was a 5-year player at basically NFL and training program.
Right. But anyhow, the real issue, or the real, I think, takeaway with Ryan Kelly, he's going into the second year now, and I think you're going to see a guy grow. I mean, the year 1 to year 2 growth in the NFL is massive. It's enormous if you're doing the right things, right? And if you're a guy who wants it, the growth is massive. And I thought the guy played pretty well as a rookie. I mean, clearly he was a first-round pick. We was supposed to be a good player, but I just like the fact that he wants to be better. He wants to grow, and he's talked about putting in the time and the work. And I think Ryan Kelly could play at just an incredible level this year if he takes that step that a lot of guys tend to take from year 1 to 2. That's, I think, got to be exciting for Andrew Luck and for that offensive line as a unit, which, by the way, those guys have spent a lot of time together this offseason, and he is probably like the third or fourth guy to tell us about the importance of that. I think that unit really has an opportunity to take a big step, and Ryan Kelly is right in the middle of it, figuratively and literally.
That's what stuck out to me is how much time the offensive line has spent together. They've noted this. And then lastly, before we move on to the NFL draft, is his, how long until he's the guy on the line?
I think it's going to happen.
I feel like that it just lends itself to his personality a lot more.
Yeah.
And you got to earn your stripes, and he's in the process of doing that. But he could be a guy that's just the no nonsense BS leader of that offensive line unit for several years to come.
Yeah, he almost strikes me as like a Joe Thomas type of dude, just like business, and he's going to be there on Sunday. He's going to play through injuries.
He's 22 and probably going into his second year, and he sounds like he's 27 and going into his fifth year.
Yeah, like seriously, like if your daughter brought this guy home, you'd be like, "Yes, sir."
Right.
And he'd be, the kid, and you'd be calling him sir.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. So, anyhow,
I can't imagine his draft intervieers.
Right?
Compared to the other draft prospects, he had to stand out like a sore thumb in a good way.
The coaches probably were nervous to interview him.
Yeah.
Is my thought.
Right.
So that's really, I think, like I said, something just to kind of file away and remember. When we get to training camp, we're going to be, I think, seeing a different Ryan Kelly and a guy who's even more focused and even more confident, and that is really something to be excited about. So there's a draft this week. It's kind of this big thing, apparently.
It'll be really interesting to see what Chris Ballard does, and I'm anxious for your thoughts on this as well. And we've kind of wrestled with this. He has just, best player available, best player available, best player available. That's been his MO since he took over, and he's, that's what you got to do as opposed to need. But the problem, Chris, and I'm sure you're aware of this, is you need players that play certain positions on the defense.
Right.
You need a corner, you need linebackers at both spots, and defensive line help would not hurt. Where do you think he's at right now, 48 hours before the draft, and where do you think they go?
Well, look, I think a couple of things. Number one, there's more than one round. So let's establish that right up at the top. And, even if their first-round pick isn't what we project it to be, and when I say what we project, I mean we think defense, right, clearly. But even if it's not, okay, anything outside of a wide receiver, pretty much, right? I don't think the masses can handle that.
Right.
Okay, like they're not going to react well to that. So short of a wide receiver, I think he can make a case for pretty much anything.
I think if he was going to take one, Jim Irsay would say, "I'm sorry, but no.
Right.
I have to put my veto on this."
Especially if he's a speed guy who's about 5'10". Yeah. I don't know if that sounds familiar to you at all, but I think you know where I'm going with that.
Just stay away from that, Chris.
Right.
Just stay.
But anyhow, I think short of wide receiver and quarterback, I think he can make a very compelling argument for just about any spot, right? And he has, I think, consistently talked about best player available. But I think the truth of the matter is everyone says they're going to do that, but no one really ever does that 100%. I think what you do is you take the best player available at a position you need, right? I mean, because the best player available is like a, I don't know. I mean, is it if it's not? I was going to say tight end. I don't want to say tight end. If it's a tackle, you can make that argument. But I mean, they may have two solid starting tackles. I don't know. I think defense is where the value is for this team. I don't know.
Look at what they did last year. I mean, it was clearly a need pick.
Sure, and it was the right pick.
And it was the right pick.
Right.
So, and that's what he's got to wrestle.
And by the way, Chris Ballard the other day said Ryan Grigson did a good job last year, really identifying and building that offensive line. So that was done completely based on need. Okay,
4 years running.
So sometimes need is the right decision.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think, but you don't just take guys for the sake of taking them. That's stupid.
Yeah,
and that gets you fired.
This is a conversation we probably both had with Ryan Kelly. Just because they chose a center doesn't mean he's the right guy. Just because you pick a center in the first round, so just because they pick that that outside linebacker that you want, doesn't mean he's going to be the right guy. So that's what Chris Ballard has to really weigh. Who are the guys that are really going to be the right fits? Because he needs to think about this defense 5 years from now, because everyone on this roster, especially defensively, is under contract for the next 3 years at max.
Right.
So the future of this team beyond that is going to be built starting Thursday night.
I think you made an excellent point there. Like, we always get caught up in what position are they going to take, and that's great, right? I mean, that matters. That's going to be your first impression. Clearly, is going to be based upon, well, this guy plays position X, right? But more than that, it has to do with, is the guy the right, as you said, pass rusher,
Right.
or offensive tackle, or tight end, or whatever it is. I mean, look, there's going to be situations where I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I mean, look, they drafted Bjorn Werner, for example, in 2013.
Yeah, right position.
It was the right position.
You need a pass rusher to learn from Robert Mathis and come into his prime. Oh, I don't know, maybe like right now.
Right position, wrong guy, right? And so it's really
that's a great example.
It's really multifaceted. The whole idea of how we assess it and the decision process and how we view it in the long term. So it'll be interesting. So you wrote a story, and we have to get to this. This is so interesting to me. You wrote a story about cornerback specifically, defensive backs, I guess, but cornerback specifically. Huge need for this team. And I want you to share with people why, perhaps, it's such a big need. I think going in, there's some fantastic cornerback options. Chris Ballard said it's one of the best classes of cornerbacks he's ever seen, and this guy knows DBs. He coached DBs in college briefly, and he has helped or had a hand in drafting some really good ones over the years. So I think I really trust his eyes on this, and Chuck Pagano to some extent as well, DB's coach in his history. So I think they have a chance to really help their organization here. But why are they in such a fix at corner? They've got Vontae Davis, and then like Rashawn Melvin, Patrick Robinson didn't work out. Darius Butler's going to safety. So if they get a couple cornerback injuries, like if they had to play today and they got a couple guys injured, you'd be playing at corner. Why are they there?
It'd be 2016 all over again.
Yeah.
And why are they here is because they drafted one cornerback in the Chuck Pagano era.
How many?
One. And his name's DeJon Smith, and he didn't last 2 seasons with the Colts.
Ooh.
This was stunning to me. I've been around this team a while. You've been around this team a while, and you feel like you know the stats that sort of jump out. This jumped out at me, and I had no idea. One cornerback chosen in all of the rounds. That's 5 drafts. That's 40 players. One cornerback.
Incredible.
And that's why they're in this position they're in with Vontae Davis, who's entering a contract year,
mm-hmm.
and then a bunch of guys. I mean, Rashawn Melvin played great in the end of the year.
Daryl Morris.
Frankie Williams.
These were guys
Tevin
who were supposed to be further
Mitchell.
Down the depth chart. And they got pressed into action.
And you saw it last year, over a couple last years. 2014, Vontae Davis had a career year, and this defense was not very good, but it was okay. It got through it. They were able to mask the lack of a pass rush. They didn't have Robert Mathis that year. And you saw how bad it got in 2015 and 2016 when Vontae was in and out of the lineup. Patrick Robinson didn't perform well last year. Greg Toller did not perform well before that. And they were just in a bind every week, and it was a constant headache, and they never overcame it. The pass rush obviously exacerbated that problem. So they need both positions. But this draft's loaded with cornerbacks. Chris Ballard has a great he's got a great resume picking these guys. He was the guy that went out for Kansas City and vetted Marcus Peters. What did he do? He's been a Pro Bowler his first 2 years in the league.
As a stud.
He was a guy with the Chicago Bears who really pushed for Peanut Tillman to be grabbed, out of tiny Louisiana Lafayette, a school no one had heard of.
And he played like 27 years in the NFL.
Played like 15 years, and he was just, you just don't find guys like that very often. Chris Ballard has done it a couple of times. Now he needs to do it again for the Indianapolis Colts because they need a cornerback. And I go back and forth between offense. You need pass rush. You're not going to win in this league unless you get a pass rush. I've seen it with my eyes the last couple of years. But, man, they could go corner in the first round and really get a stud that would pay off for years to come.
Yeah. And one thing to add to that point, Chris Ballard has talked a little bit about this, and we're just learning kind of what he's into and what he likes and what his preferences are. And when he talks about cornerbacks, he has, I think, placed a little bit of an emphasis on size, certainly. I mean, everyone wants, big, long cornerbacks, of course. Yeah. But, I think, will really emphasize that. He talked about this on the radio, in fact, the other day, and I sort of followed up with him at the Chuck Strong event the other night. And he just said a couple of things. He said, number one, he says he wants guys with length, and that certainly is a response to, the size you see at wide receiver in the NFL, right? And in addition to that, in this defense, they got to play press coverage, so you got to be able to match them physically. So that's one thing. And then he said he wants guys who are able to convert interceptions. So the hands are important to him because he says it's just too precious of an opportunity to drop interceptions.
You change a game.
Yes. He says and that's what he said. He said we can't forego those game-changing plays. He says those can win games for you. And I just thought that was an excellent point. Not groundbreaking, granted, but I don't think we really place a lot of emphasis on that when we talk about defensive backs. And I just thought, really, you know what? That's a great thing to really emphasize just because of what the added value is there, and the impact that can have on games.
It's sort of a Mike Adams factor.
Mm-hmm.
A guy he's got that right spot, right time mentality.
Sure.
But think of how many games he changed with interceptions. And look, if they take a cornerback in round 1 or 2 or wherever, and this guy's maybe, a day one starter, a little bit like Ryan Kelly was last year, he's going to take his lumps because it's a tough position to play in this league, first of all.
Sure.
And it's a tough position to play in this defense because he's on an island a lot of the time, sometimes without safety help. And it's just a tough position to play no matter what because the athleticism you're facing. But absolutely this could be, a redo of, you draft him in the first round and he's in the starting lineup, by Saturday.
Yeah. You've got a list of some mock drafts there. Before we get to that, I think we should probably just touch on something I wrote about this week, which was just Chris Ballard's approach to viewing players with character flags. And there's probably not more of those such players in this draft than other drafts, but there's one in particular who just has captured all the headlines, and you know who he is. It's Joe Mixon. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know if that the Colts are more likely to take him than other teams, but I will just say this. You go back and you read Chris Ballard's comments when asked generally and specifically about Joe Mixon and just generally about players with these types of issues. I thought he was very unapologetic about being very open-minded about that and guys like that. And doesn't mean they'll take even one guy with a character flag, but that is not going to scare him off. And what was your takeaway? I mean, did you get the same impression I got? I thought there's absolutely a chance they go Joe Mixon or whatever. I mean, I think everything's on the table.
I'm 100% in agreement. Look, he's ready for the daggers, and he said it. And he knows that if you draft a player like that with the red flags and the history, you're going to take some. And he said you take those for a couple of months, and they start playing. He's done it before. Every situation is different. Every player. He said the one thing that really jumped out was he likes to do it himself. He likes to block out the outside noise, interview the player himself, spend some time with him, do his own homework, then make his own judgment. And he's talked about this both at the Combine and last week before the draft. So everything's on the table. I'm with you on that. And then it would not shock me at all. It depends on the round and the situation, but it would not shock me at all if the Colts took a player like that this draft, next draft, down the line. He feels comfortable in that. He's had success with that, and he's willing to accept the criticism that comes with it, and it doesn't seem like it phases him.
So what are your thoughts on this? Like, we get into this debate. So I did a really scientific Twitter poll, as you know. Obviously, it's basically the same as a Gallup poll, right? No, not at all. And I asked basically, look, would you, as a Colts fan, be accepting of the Colts drafting Joe Mixon? And I think the numbers were something like 65-35 in favor of them drafting Joe Mixon. But a lot of people responded to me by saying, well, it depends where they draft him. And I get that, because you kind of assign importance to a guy based on where you draft him. However, I want your thoughts on this. I also feel like there's a counter argument to that, and this is not me advocating for Joe Mixon at all. I'm just sort of delving into this mindset. I actually think there's kind of a hole in that sort of approach, because if you like the guy and you think he's a great player, then just draft him, because it's going to be what it's going to be. Like, nobody's going to love him. If people hate Joe Mixon, they're not going to love him because he drafted him in the third round. Like, it is what it is. So if you like him, if you think he's a first rounder or second rounder, then freaking draft him already and be done with it. So I don't know. That's just my thought. It's not me proposing it. I'm just saying, like, if you're going to be that guy and you think, well, you know what, you got the big cojones. I guess I shouldn't say that, but whatever. This is on the internet, right? So if you're that guy and you're brave, then go for it, big guy, right? I mean, that's just how I see it, but maybe you disagree. What do you think?
It's really complicated and it's really layered because if you, in your mind at least, it says, oh, well, yeah, he'd be worth a third-round pick, right? Because the value is less and he fell if he's a first-round talent on your board. But a first-round pick and a third-round pick, it doesn't change what he did, and it doesn't change the fact that the video is still the same. So it's still the same player. But in the mind, the daggers would be less intense if you took him in the third round. That's just the way it is. It doesn't make it right or wrong. And there is no right answer to this. And it doesn't change the video wherever you take him, whether he's picked up on the street tomorrow, after he gets, if he doesn't get drafted, which won't happen. But Chris Ballard, it's very interesting to see how he's gonna. I would be very curious to see how this plays out because it wouldn't stun me if Joe Mixon is an Indianapolis Colt by the end of next week.
And he talked about the daggers, and let me tell you, there will be daggers no matter where no matter where he lands. I'm very interested to see this play out as well. I can envision a scenario where you turn on the 6 o'clock news the day after Joe Mixon is drafted, and the lead story on the local news is that video. You know what I mean? It's going to happen. It's just a reality. And I think the Kansas City Chiefs, where Ballard came from, they dealt with that with Tyreek Hill, certainly, who was a domestic violence guy as well, punched or I guess abused his pregnant girlfriend, which is obviously reprehensible. And there was a story in the Kansas City Star the very next day, and the headline on the website, the headline on that story was the Chiefs, who talk about character, just drafted a guy who choked his pregnant girlfriend. And it's basically like, hey, people, this is you. This is your team.
What do the Colts call them? Horseshoe guys?
Yeah.
Be hard to sell that one to the public and your fan base.
Jamersey, 3 daughters up here, who are on the first page of the media guide. Executive vice presidents.
You know what? Also, you can sell to your public and to your fans and your season ticket holders are wins.
Absolutely.
And this fan base is tired of going 8-8, and that's the dilemma that you're faced with if you're Chris Ballard.
Did Tyreek Hill help the Chiefs win some games?
By the way, we just saw Dante Moncrief leaves the facility, so he's in town. He's in town. He's been working out with the team.
So there you go. Breaking news on the Chopping Wood podcast, 35 minutes in. I'm sure 3 people heard
32 minutes, pretty close. We got eyes and ears everywhere. That's the bottom line.
All right, let's move on. I guess we're probably running long here, but you've got some you went through some mock drafts.
Let me run through who the pundits and the experts and the so-called future tellers have the Colts taken. Pretty decidedly defensive feel here. I'm going to run through them. Peter King has him taking Takaris McKinley, the linebacker out of UCLA. I think he's played a little defensive end as well.
Yeah.
But in this league, get to the quarterback, right? Doesn't matter where you line up.
Yep.
Peter Schrager has Charles Harris, a defensive end out of Missouri. Charles Harris is in a couple others. Derek Barnett is another defensive end from Tennessee that's being tapped to the Colts. The one that jumps out is Ryan Ramczyk. He's an offensive tackle from Wisconsin. Obviously, Chris Ballard has ties to Wisconsin and Barry Alvarez. He's very fond of him. That's the only offensive lineman that I found.
Wait, one aside before you go on. That comes from Lance Zierlein, that mock, and I believe he actually has a long-standing relationship with Chris Ballard. Just little known fact.
It would stun me if they went offensive line.
I don't expect
That's just my guess.
But I'm just throwing that out there.
The draft has surprised us in the last couple of years,
sure,
as much as anybody. The one, wild card out here is Corey Davis, who's a first-round talent out of Western Michigan, but he's a wide receiver. Doug Farr from Bleacher Report has the Colts taking him. It ain't happening unless it ain't happening.
I mean,
I can't see it.
He's certainly a first-round talent. I actually saw the guy live against Ball State last year. But I mean, he's incredible. But I'd be surprised. I don't know. But I don't know. But we don't know Chris Ballard we think we do either.
That's the one thing in the back of my mind.
That's why I'm being careful here.
We
don't know Chris Ballard. We think we know what he says, but we don't know what he does. He hasn't done anything yet. So we'll have to see.
He can say all he wants, but he's going to speak louder on Thursday night and Friday night and then Saturday. Then the last one is Hassan Reddick. He's an inside linebacker from Temple. I remember talking to him at the Combine in February. He's a first-round guy, and an inside linebacker would not surprise me. I still think pass rush. I keep telling myself, don't overcomplicate it, right?
Right.
You got to go with what is the basic, the gross, the biggest hole in their defense.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Anything jump out on these
Well,
from you?
well, I was going to add a couple things. Number one, I did because obviously I know everything about what the Colts are going to do on Thursday, and so I did a couple of media mock drafts. And what that means is someone, in this case the LA Times, sort of puts together a roster of writers who cover various teams, and we kind of run through and everyone makes a pick. So it actually gives you a realistic look at things.
Nobody knows the teams better than
right.
the beat writers.
I think they're pretty effective. So they got to me at 15, and a couple guys I wanted were gone, and I ended up taking Takaris McKinley from UCLA, which certainly a need pick, but I think a guy who has pop, and the Colts just at pass rush right now, they have some guys who really aren't sort of like natural pass rushers. This guy really is, and I think has the athleticism and the speed that they just lack there. So it'd be interesting. I don't know if he's the best pick, but he certainly would be a guy you plug in there and you play.
There's also the Reuben Foster.
Well, I was going to get to that. So here's an interesting little known fact or something to add here. On Friday, I did another one with Bengals.com, the Cincinnati Bengals website. They did a media mock draft. They got to me, and it was the same day the Reuben Foster story had come out. Well, he was there, and I said, "Give me some Reuben Foster."
Right.
It just doesn't bother me.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Just doesn't bother me.
Wouldn't surprise me at all. Position of need.
Yeah.
And a guy you could see really selling in there for several years.
So the guy smoked the joint. So makes you an idiot, not a guy who is gonna be an axe murderer.
I'm not gonna commend him for his choices, but I'm not gonna criticize him for his. I mean, come on.
It's immaturity is what it is. Yeah.
Right.
But anyhow, and actually, what he says is that it was a diluted sample. So I don't even know that he did anything. But what the diluted sample suggests is that you were trying to dilute the urine test. So you were maybe drinking a lot of Gatorade or water. So it suggests you got something to hide. But anyhow, as for your mocks there, I think people are finally coming around and seeing this team for what it is, which is a team that needs defensive help.
Yeah.
And we've heard a lot of pundits talk about the offensive line, and I think they're starting to figure it out.
I don't know if they've been paying attention.
Yeah.
That was the long-standing storyline with this team, and we wrote about it more than anybody, and we get it. But I think they sort of turned a corner in 2016, and you got to give Ryan Grigson a little bit of credit. He drafted some young, talented guys. They're going to need some seasoning. They brought in an experienced coach, Joe Philbin. They got better as the season went on, and the numbers back that up.
Right.
I would be stunned if they went offense at all in the first round. All three phases of the defense need help, and you got to address that. You need playmakers. You need pop. They need Robert Mathis back in 2009 and 10 and 2013. They need a guy like that to develop into. And this is when you do it. You do it in the draft because you don't have to pay him a king's ransom in free agency.
Right. Also, this is really a tangent here, but apparently Robert Mathis has been in the building like a lot. Because Jabal Sheard, by the way, mentioned today that Robert Mathis is going to help me be a great player. I was like, excuse me? What? How?
And aside to that, a lengthy conversation with Robert Mathis in the last couple of years, and he said he never wanted to be a coach early in his career, but he said he has learned to really appreciate the art of pass rushing, and that would be something he wants to do. Coach specifically pass rushing. And I can think of at least one NFL team that needs it.
I have no idea who you're talking about.
That's where I think they go on Thursday night. I think they go pass rusher. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and he'll get the benefit of perhaps being coached on the side by Robert Mathis. So, this could work out. So I'm excited. Excited is the wrong word. Intrigued. I think last year we kind of felt Ryan Kelly, right? We kind of had a sense, and it's anticlimactic, right? When it happens,
right?
It's like, okay.
Friday night,
the right pick,
and Saturday are very intriguing as well because they have 7 picks in the first 5 rounds. That's a lot of different options.
They're gonna get talent.
Wouldn't be surprising if they traded down to get more picks, more cornerbacks, more rush linebackers, excuse me. But by the end of Saturday evening, we're going to have a really good feel of what Chris Ballard wants to do long-term with his defense, hopefully. We'll see.
Yeah. So, listen, I know everyone loves Chris Ballard right now for the most part. Everyone's kind of on board with Chris Ballard right now. But really, it's that draft where I think general managers really build their reputation for the better or for worse. So I think we'll see. It's all TBD. We'll see how you feel about them on Saturday night, if you love them or hate them then. But of course, we won't know anything for 3 years anyway. But
right, yeah.
But at least it gives us something to talk about.
That's the one aside no one wants to mention is the fact that
we just care about having something to talk about. It's all about content.
Reggie Wayne was Plan B in 2001. No one wanted a wide receiver and decent career.
Robert Mathis played special teams as a rookie. Is all I'm saying.
Right.
So anyhow, I think it'll be fun, and I think I see another podcast in our future, in our very near future. So that'll be it for now. I think we can wind this down and wrap this up. Stay tuned to IndyStar.com. We got lots of stuff coming, including a mock draft, and I'll touch on the pass rushers here in the next day or so. And Zach's got a good story up now on the cornerbacks available. So lots on the website, lots more to come, and certainly a lot to come from Colts headquarters. I'm Stephen Holder with Zach Keefer. Thank you again for listening.